Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Trustcast Show. And we're really happy to have one with us today, Richard Hubbert. Um, Thanks, and welcome to the show, Richard.
Thank you for having me.
So today's guest started his career swinging a hammer as a craftsman, earned a degree in construction engineering, and built two companies that have touched over $500 million in projects. It's a lot of construction. And during and including the final home ever designed by one of the greatest architects in American history. So, Richard, when you're a young craftsman on a job site and you look back at that guy now, what did he understand about building that most executives in a boardroom never will?
So, you're referring to the architect that I worked on this project with?
No, no, I said when you're like a young craftsman in the job
Yes.
site and you look back at that guy, you as a young craftsman, what did you
Got
understand
it.
at that time about building that most of the executives, even now later in your career, what you knew back then, that most of the executives you're talking to with now wouldn't even understand?
Right, right. Well, it really started with uh, working with my father, who was not in the construction industry, by the way, but we lived in a house, and my father decided to take on many projects in that house when we moved in, and I was a young man. And what when I look back, it was pretty remarkable. As I said, my father was an advertising executive, not anything to do with construction, but yet um, we would do these projects in the house that would be anything from renovating our basement, fitting that out into a new family room. And he did have an artistic touch about himself. He loved art, so everything was done pretty uniquely. But anything from projects around the house to putting up crown moldings to um, fitting out as I said, the lower level of the house into and making it into an office or a family room. But it was like the jack of all trades. We did plumbing, we did electrical, we did carpentry, we did masonry. And don't ask me how my father, because, back then there was no internet or anything like that. So I'm assuming he just read journals and, just taught himself how to do these things. And so that's really that was my very first jump into construction. And I always enjoyed doing those things and learning those things with my father. And then that kind of led into, um, it was a development that we lived in. And I had made friends with a lot of the boys in that development. And we were, our house was one of the first ones to be built in the neighborhood along with these others. So there was many more to still be constructed.
Hmm.
So my friends and I thought it would be a great idea if we built a tree house, because there was woods behind our homes. So we did, and but the only thing we did not do right is we helped ourselves to the lumber after the carpenters would leave for the day on the other houses that were being built. So
Yep.
we were very proud of what we were doing. And, of course, this was secretive. Our parents didn't even know we were doing it and what have you. And one day I was riding my bike down the street, and this truck pulls up next to me, and this gentleman says, "How you doing?" And I was like, "I'm great." He goes, "Hey, listen, I heard a rumor that there's a really cool treehouse somewhere around here." And he goes, "Do you know anything about it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, kind of. I do, yeah." And he goes, "Oh, that's great." He goes, "Can I ask you, where did you get the materials to build this tree house?" And I was never a good liar, and I never will be. But I admitted to him. I said, "Well, we took it from your job sites here, and it wasn't a lot. Trust me, it wasn't. This wasn't. When I say treehouse, it was like a platform and maybe a couple walls." So he said to me, he goes, "What do you think we should do about this? He goes, what? How do we solve this issue?" And I said, "Well, I guess I have to somehow pay you back for the lumber and what have you." And he goes, "Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you go home and kind of tell this story to your dad and see what his reaction is and see what he would recommend?" So I went home. My dad came home from work that evening, and I told him the story of what we did. And of course, he was not in any way, shape, or form happy with the whole situation. But the next morning, he decided, he goes, we're gonna go over to one of these homes being built, and we're gonna meet with this gentleman, and we're gonna talk about this." And that's what we did. We went over and discussed it, and of course, I apologized again, said I'm very sorry that it was the wrong thing to do. So my dad and this builder got into a conversation, and it led to, well, what would be a solution here? What are we going to do? And this builder said, "Well, how would you like to work it off?" And now, mind you, I was probably 13 years old at the time, 13, maybe 14. And of course, other than working on those projects with my dad and building this treehouse and what have you, I didn't know. But he said, so I said, I would be okay with that. So he said, "Oh, great. Well, why don't you show up here starting tomorrow?" We start at 7:30 in the morning. And so I did. And it started out with me just sweeping out the homes, organizing lumber into stacks, labor work. And I started to become more intrigued with building because I watched the carpenters. I watched how they framed the house. I watched when the plumber came in and how he ran the plumbing lines, and the electrician, and how everything kind of went together. And I really enjoyed it, and I was really intrigued about it. So it turned out that I ended up working for this builder all my summers when I went through school, right through high school, and when I was in senior high school during the winter breaks, I ended up working with him. And I became a carpenter, if you will. I knew how to do framing. I knew how to, do that trade. And as I said to you, one thing, my father was very big on education. Him being a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, then he went to the Wharton School of Business. And so when I was in 10th grade, going to 11th grade, he at one point, said to me, "Okay, we're getting to that point. What are your thoughts on furthering your education after high school?" And I, with hesitation, said, "Well, Dad, you know what? I'd really like to just work, get a job, work, and buy a car. That's my goal." I didn't know what his reaction was going to be. And to my surprise, he looked at me and he said, "I think that's a great idea." And I'll never forget that. I just I couldn't believe that reaction. So I
Yeah.
did. I graduated high school and I went to work, and I worked for this builder. Um, and then I moved on to another larger company. And they were doing more commercial type construction, and I worked and I did buy my car. And this went on for about 3 years, and going into the fourth year. And my father would always ask me once in a while, "Hey, how's everything going? Everything working out okay?" And I'd be, "Yeah, I'm doing fine." However, it reached a point where I started looking around, and I'm like, "Wow, we're all young guys here swinging these hammers and building this stuff and putting everything, doing the construction." And there was very few older people working. So
Mm-hmm.
I at one of the points where my father asked, "How's everything going?" I said, "Everything's going great. However, I've noticed that, we're all young. There's no older carpenters or older masons or older." And he goes, "Think about that." He goes, "You played sports." He goes, "There's a limit to to that." And he goes, "Think about it. If you're an owner of a building company, and do you want to hire older guys that might work at a slower pace, or would you rather have younger, aggressive workers that are going to be more productive?" And I said, "Yeah, I understand that." So it was kind of like the light bulb went off at that point in time, and I said, I think it's time for me to think about getting an education further than high school. And so I did. I applied. I got into college, and I got into engineering, construction engineering, and majored in that. And I did very well. In fact, I surprised myself. Okay, because I was an okay student in high school, but I was definitely not on the honor roll or anything like that. I got by. I showed up. I did my work, but when I got to college, I really, really took a deep interest in what I was learning. And it was a well-rounded construction education. And when I graduated very high in my class, and I went out and I worked for I'll call it a medium-sized construction management firm in Philadelphia. And this company was a third-generation company. So but they had a resume of clients that were unbelievable. We're working in almost every institution in Philadelphia, the universities and hospitals. We were in retail. So I started out as supervising work for that company in the field, being a project superintendent. Then they brought me into the office and went into more of a project management role. And then I worked my way into being into estimating. And I really took a liking to estimating.
So when did you go out and start on your own? How long was it before you actually started your?
What happened was that, I'm working for this company. It was a medium-sized company, and as I said, it was a third generation. And a lot of times when you have third generation companies, things can go a little bit south, if you will, with the third generation. And so the person running the company, yeah, he started, I hate to put it this way, but robbing Peter to pay Paul, maybe, maybe being a little too allured by the money.
Typical thing that happens in the construction business.
It sure does. And I don't know any other business where there's not many other businesses I'm aware of anyway that your revenue comes in or your monthly billings, are substantial and that money comes in. But by the time you pay your subcontractors and your vendors and all your other expenses, you are left with I don't want to call it a minimal amount, but it's certainly not an amount that you would live a big lifestyle
Right.
on, if you will. And
So
so
you got to keep an eye on that, because at the end of the month,
yes,
when the money disappears.
The problem was, trying to run work and get bids from subcontractors when I was working there, they were very nice about it, but they'd say, Rich, you know what? We're owed X amount of dollars, and until we get paid, we're not going to be able to move forward with certain things. So I decided, what? This isn't going to be the right place for me. Everybody has a reputation. It doesn't matter if it's my company or not. I'm part of it, and it's my reputation on the line. So I went and I gave my notice and interviewed with a major company in Philadelphia, and I actually got an offer from them. However, this company that I was working for, there was a woman that worked there. She was in marketing for that company, and she approached me and she said, "Boy, I'm shocked you gave your notice and you're moving on." And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "I'm surprised. I thought you liked it here and all of that." And I said, "Well," and I told her why. I told her my reason why, and she looked at me and she goes, "I don't disagree." And she goes, "I give you a lot of credit for recognizing that and wanting to move on." And she goes, "But how would you like to go out on your own?" And I said, "Well, I'm 28 years old. I'm living week to week, as everybody else was. And I just don't have the wherewithal to do something like that." Well, it turns out that she was a very professional woman. She was very well educated, and her husband was also highly educated. He was a Harvard graduate attorney. They never had any children together, and so she approached me and she said, "Well, what if we, back you? Would you be interested in that?"
Wow.
And
Well, you must have made an impression on her at a young age.
Yeah, yeah, and so I did. I went out on my own with her. She also left the company, and we started a company. And that was an experience in itself, because when I was working for that company, I had a relationship with a lot of people, a lot of facilities people at hospitals and the universities and what have you. And I started saying to them, "Hey, I'm thinking about maybe going on my own." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, Rich, when you do, give us a call. Yeah, we'll be glad to talk to you." So I left and we went out and we started this company, and I started calling on these people, and they were very nice. However, the response was really, "Listen, when you get some jobs under your belt and you have some things on your resume, give us a call. We'll be glad to talk to you then." Because thinking about it now, it's smart, because listen, their job would be on the line taking a risk with somebody that's just new in business and doesn't have a proven track record. So we started out doing very small jobs, fit outs, as we call them, office fit outs, or things of that nature in high-rise buildings. Maybe somebody would lease so many square feet and want to fit out.
There's a lot of companies that do pretty well just doing
Absolutely.
what you call
there
fit
are
out.
companies that just
that's
specialize
their
in that.
primary business.
That's exactly right. So we had to run very lean and mean. So we watched every penny. So I can remember working during the day. In those days, in '84, this was, those were the days where you still wore a suit and tie when you went to work. We worked out of a garage with a piece of plywood for a table, and I would sit there and do my estimating and put proposals together during the day. If I had to go to a job site and meet with the owner or something, I would go and have those meetings. But I would end my day coming home at around 5 o'clock, and I would get changed into different clothes. I would grab a vacuum and a bucket and sponge and rags, and I'd go to the jobs and I'd clean them down. I'd make sure they were nice and clean because it saved money on us not having to hire a laborer. And I'd get home about 11 or 12 o'clock at night and then do that same routine, and that went on. And so little by little, we started gaining other business. Look, everybody needs a break at somewhere, right? Hard work is great, and that's, building it slowly and doing everything the right way is all well and good. But I firmly believe that, look, it comes down to you need a break somewhere. You need somebody that's gonna. So it turns out
Take a chance on you.
Yeah, it turns out that the woman that I was in business with, her name was Betsy. She went to Wellesley for college, and it turned out that she realized that the executive vice president of the University of Pennsylvania was in college and graduated with her. So she called. Her name was Helen O'Bannon at the time, and she was the executive vice president of the University of Pennsylvania. So they connected with each other, and we got an opportunity with the University of Pennsylvania, and not big jobs, not large jobs, but they started us out with small projects. We stayed on top of those, because one thing we did not want to do is let them down or fail. So we were very conscious of how those jobs were run. The superintendents that we hired to run those jobs, how they were doing, I would visit those job sites a lot, and little by little, we started getting larger projects at the University of Pennsylvania. And then we started to branch out into other arenas as well. And Betsy came to me at one point and said, listen, I don't know whether this is going to help us or not, but there's this new program, and it's called Women Business Enterprise. And I said, okay. And she said, well, it's WBE, and it stands for Women Business Enterprise. And she said, if I own 51%, we can submit our application and become licensed as a WBE contractor. I said, okay, there's benefits to that? And she said, well, I believe there are. I don't want to guarantee anything, but what I'm reading, I think there are. And she goes, put it this way, it won't matter, either way, right? We're building our business. We're doing it the right way. So she goes, if it's a benefit, fine. If it doesn't mean anything, then it's no harm done. So we went through that process. Of course, I had no issue giving her 1%, my 1%, to make her the majority owner. And we did. We got certified as a WBE, and we started. There were projects. They were known as set-asides. So they would be government projects, like the city of Philadelphia. Yep. And it would be a set-aside project. They'd say this project is set aside as a WBE project. So we would bid against other WBE certified contractors, which there were maybe one or two others at the most at the time. And so we got a project, and what it was a major project, and it was the renovation of the Philadelphia Fairmount Water Works, which was an historical site. And at one time supplied all the water to the public water to the city out of the river, because it was right on the river. It was a very challenging project. Over the years, it was went from being the supply of water to the city to, when it was done doing that activity, if you will, or that purpose, John B. Kelly decided to put an Olympic-sized pool in the lower level of this place, because he was very involved with the Olympics. And his daughter was actually Grace Kelly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he was very well known in Philadelphia. And he decided he was going to put this Olympic-sized pool in for swimmers to train and what have you. So, and then after that was done for years, that was like a pool for years. Then it was turned into what was known as the Philadelphia Aquarium. So they made a bunch of aquariums out of the lower level. So our job was to remove these aquariums.
I hate to short circuit this, but we're going to run out of time before we even get to talk about your current business. So how did you go from?
I do have a tendency to kind of ramble on, but that was a major job for us. And the short and long of all of this was the company kept growing, and eventually Betsy, who was older than me, said, I'm going to resign, and that's when I took over 100% ownership of the company and just moved it from there. And we continued in institutions like the University of Pennsylvania, Villanova University, Rutgers University, and then we got into the pharmaceutical industry as well. So it just was one stepping stone after another that I've been very blessed with, and fortunate to have had this wonderful opportunity, and to meet Betsy when I met her working where I worked, and the experience of building the company to what it is. And I've enjoyed it. We have two divisions. One is residential, one is commercial. So in the residential one, I've had the honor of working with some world-renowned architects like Robert Stern. And my latest project was with Peter Bohlin. Peter Bohlin is known for designing Bill Gates' house and Steve Jobs' house. And he started Bohlin, Swinsky, Jackson Architects, which is one of the largest architectural firms in the United States. They do work all over the globe. And I've had the pleasure of working personally with Peter, who is now 88 years old, but still sharp as a tack. And what it gives me goosebumps to think about, just being with him, and everything's done the old-fashioned way with Peter still. He still uses a pencil and paper. He doesn't even have a cell phone or a computer. So
wow.
When I want to talk to him, I call his wife.
Call his office.
I call his office, or I'll call his wife Sally and say, "Can you hand the phone to Peter?" So it's been a really wonderful experience.
So if I've never built a custom home before and I'm about to spend $2 million or more, what's the one thing that most clients wish someone had told them at the very beginning?
Okay. My advice is when that opportunity comes to us, when people come to us and say, we're thinking about building a home, my first advice is, okay, great, sounds good, but build what you're going to use. Don't build anything other than what you're going to use. Because in the late 80s and 90s, we live in a world of trends. there's no question about it. We live in a world of trends. And the trend in the 80s and 90s was the McMansions. Everybody wanted these 10,000 square foot homes with libraries and music rooms and, verandas and all those things. And I was more than happy to build them. But as time went on and their children, grew up and moved on, they started to try and sell their homes to downsize, and nobody wanted them because they had all these spaces. So I always, my first words to people are, build what you're going to use. Don't overbuild, think about it that way. And then, that's really how the process should start, right? And then you go into the conceptual design. What are your needs? I go through, what are your needs? What are the specific needs you need in your house and the necessary things? And then you get into what would you like? And then you get into the type of architecture. Is it modern? Is it traditional? Is it, and so it's a process. It's a process that's followed. And the way we run our business is we run it transparently. We're huge proponents of collaboration, which is key. I call it putting a team together. You have the owner, you have us, we have the architect, we have engineers, we have interior designers, but it's got to be a collaborative team effort together. And that's where you get success. And we also work transparently. So in other words, I share all my costs with my clients, so they know we're not adding anything on. We're soliciting bids from subcontractors, qualified subcontractors that we know can do the quality work, that we know can meet schedule. And
so I have a question, because I know a lot of people in the construction business a lot, and I've actually built multiple homes myself. But when you are, what you're talking about is kind of unusual, I think. At least it is in the Seattle area, where you're sharing or being transparent. So do you set a certain amount, depending on the project, of, okay, this is going to be our margin above and beyond what our hard costs are, or how do you do that?
So as I said before, it's a process. After you get through the design process and the house is what the people are envisioning and what they like, we will do a very detailed budget for them, and it's broken down by each trade, everything involved in the house. It's not just one number. Hey, here's the number to build your house. It's broken down straight from excavation, concrete, carpentry, right on through every trade. And we put a fee or markup, and depending on the size of the house, that determines what fee we charge. And then if there's certain things that aren't identified when we're putting that budget together, we'll put an allowance in. So things like plumbing fixtures is a good example, right? Until they select their fixtures and know what they are, we put an appropriate allowance in for those. And then we send them to our suppliers. They go there with their interior designers or the architect or themselves, pick out what they want. We get a discount from our suppliers. I show them the quote that I got from the supplier. And if it's within their budget, if there's money, excess money, if it comes in under that budgeted allowance amount, they get that money, doesn't get charged to them. But if it goes over, it's a change order. So that's how the transparency works, the collaboration and the transparency. And, the collaboration is important, because once a budget is established, it's also, I look at our role as, we got to keep the architect and the owner to keep marching along in that direction to stay within that budget, because what can happen
So
is
how do
what's
you
known
do
as
that?
it's
Creep.
not easy, because it becomes scope creep, as we call it. So an owner might go somewhere and select something and say, I really love this. And I have to be the one to say, okay, you love it. This is what it means to the job. It means this much more. And if it has a schedule impact, I have to let them know that. And then they can make the decision. whether they want to do that or not. So, and same thing with the architects. Architects, I love architects, so I hope nobody architect takes this the wrong way, but they do have a tendency to start putting their visions in that can kind of grow past what the owner's visions were. And, and we call that scope creep as well. That can also have an impact, will have an impact on the budget and the schedule. So it's a balance.
I would always say, so when I was building, I just saw it, just get out of my pocket already.
Yeah,
the architect.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
anyway, that was many years ago when I was involved in that.
Yeah. So it's listen. And it's what's challenging now is the internet and AI. It's so easy for people now to say, I'm looking for a 5,000 square foot house in this location, a traditional design, this many bedrooms. How much should this house cost? So instead of people coming in and saying, we're thinking about building a house and this is, they're coming in now, they think they're a step ahead of us, that we should be able to build this house for this. And it's not that we disagree with what information they have. However, until you dissect it and get into all the, so there's a learning curve involved for us to kind of tell them it's okay to use AI. It's okay to look on the internet, but don't carve that into stone just yet. There's many factors that go into it. So that's one of the hurdles that we're facing these days now. And look, it's a reality, and it's not going to go away. So we need to be cognizant of it and understand it and handle it appropriately.
So if I'm building a house and I talk to a builder and they gave me a number, how do I know the number is real and they're just not lowballing me to get the job? And they're going to, this is just like the old story. If you haven't really built a house before, this is as old as the hills, where they lowball and then they kill you on change orders.
Yeah.
How do you know you're getting a builder? How can you do the research to find out, well, this guy is really on the level?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I'll answer it this way: it's your reputation, right? You have to do if anybody's thinking about building a house, I highly recommend they do their homework. Don't just pick a contractor and say okay, I want to build a house, or they there can be times where we become one of the bidders, okay, and we're bidding against another contractor. And so once again, I am a huge proponent on giving the client more than what they have expected. So we're not just going to give a number. We're going to give a very detailed breakdown. We're going to give a schedule. We're going to talk about constructability issues, if there's anything we see on the drawings that are going to be a challenge to construct. So what I try to do with that is to arm them with enough information, accurate information, so that when that contractor comes in and he's 30% under my number, they can sit down with that builder and say, well, did you have this? And what did you have in for that? And what is your schedule for doing this? And it doesn't take them very long to realize, hey, this contractor over here, he's going to play the change order game on me. Whereas Rich and his company makes more, is logical, and it's broken down and the information is there for us. That's how you circumvent getting caught, with those contracts. Because construction always had always has some sort of stigma over it that, some people think we make a fortune, or that we have these ways of manipulating things and making money, in different ways. And that can work for some contractors, but they're not going to be around very long, and their reputation is going to be sustainable. And that's the difference. You have to maintain a reputation. You have to be honest and open, collaborative, and you need to run an organized project. You got to, right from the cleanliness of the job site to the safety of the job site. There's many things that allow you to become successful, but it's an everyday, and we got to stay up in technology. Every day there's new materials and products being presented to us. Well, I don't like being the guinea pig, on new materials. They might be fine and well, but I'm not going to be the test case. I want some proven time before I recommend them or suggest them to a client.
What would be an example of a material where you've seen recently where you're thinking, it looks good, but no?
Yeah. Well, okay. We can go back probably, I'm going to probably put it in a time frame of 8 to 10 years ago. Products came out that, as an example, siding that's used on a house. Okay. And it always would be either cedar siding, real cedar siding, or it would be aluminum siding or vinyl siding, which we've never really done at all. Where there's stucco, or there's brick, or there's stone. Well, there's a product that came out that is a cementitious product, and it's made into siding that looks like real cedar siding, if you will. And it's sustainable. It has low carbon footprint to fabricate and make, and it withstands the weather conditions, and so it was like, wow, this is perfect, and
it was less.
And it was less money, right? But so we watched that product. We watched it for a few years, and when clients would ask about, hey, we're aware of it. Yes. Okay. It's been out. It's only been on, used on houses now for 2 years. I want to see the feedback that's coming in, and is it really what it is, and what have you. And after that's proven, then, we're a proponent. We are a proponent of it. So there's many products that are now coming out that are like that, especially with, when you think of houses that are
So I'm going to interrupt you because I just know about one of those products that you're kind of describing, and that was made by Louisiana Pacific, and you probably know the LP siding, but then there's other products which were all cementitious that did well, but the LP siding, which was lightweight, looked like cedar, cost less, easy to put on, easy to cut, everything about it was easy to work with, and lo and behold, about 5-6 years in, the whole thing started to go south. If it was, facing a certain way, it was getting exposed to weather. I guess I'm kind of going off there on particular.
Yeah, no.
Was that what was running through your mind?
Yes, exactly. That's why I said I refuse to be the guinea pig. It takes a lot of research and digging in, and because listen, when new products are presented to you, of course they're going to be presented in this positive way, and hey, they're great for the carbon footprint, they're sustainable, they're going to last longer, they're weather resistant, they're whatever, and that's, of course they're going to be presented in that way. But the proof is in the time. You gotta do the research, dig into it, talk to other people, and then see how it lasts how it goes for the first few years, and then you make the decision. Yeah, you know what? It's a viable product. It makes sense from every aspect. It's going to save money. It's good for the carbon footprint. It's sustainable. It's guaranteed for X amount of years. It looks visually good, and then that's when you can consciously look somebody in the eye and say, "I recommend it." But it takes time for that to happen.
So I'm reading here, Great Estates also owns its own custom architectural millwork company. Why does that matter to a home? Is that right? You own your own architectural millwork company?
We did. Okay.
You did?
I did. That was a company that back in 2006, that was a company that these two gentlemen started, probably around the same time I started and went out on my own. And they were great two individuals that were really into the millwork and build a nice business. So I used to give them a lot of work, and they were very reliable in the product they produced. And so they decided, it was time for them to close shop and, retire. And they reached out to me and said, I don't know whether they have any interest or not, but, so I ended up, yes, buying that company. And, they did it. The workers were great, but it was at a time when the economy was turning in 2007.
Oh yeah,
and it became so competitive that we would bid work and our competitors would underbid everything just to keep the quote unquote keep their workers busy. Well, that doesn't work for me because one, I don't want the stress of doing work and working for free and keeping the quality control up and running a business and not making any money at all. And it just became to the point where it was ridiculous. I mean, it was no sense in even bidding on projects. And so, I decided, what, that is not the business for me. Although I will say that I do really love that aspect of construction, millwork and cabinetry and trim.
Mm-hmm.
I've always liked it. It's an art. And not
it
that
makes
I'm an
a home
artist,
special, doesn't it?
It sure does. And so, but it you know what? You can only do so much. So I realize that as well. I'm like, wait a minute, am I a contractor? Am I a millwork owner? Am I I just, it was just a conscious decision I made that, as much as I liked it and was proud of it, it was a rigorous, tough business to really be successful at.
So your wife, Katie, is your VP and marketing director. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
So what's it like building a business together, and how does her perspective shape the client experience?
Well, so, my early in my career was really spent working. That was my life. So, I got a later start in life when it became to marriage, if you will. So, Katie is younger than I am, but she is a very motivated person, very motivated, and is very interested in my business. Was, when we met and what I do. And she has a wonderful personality. She has a way of talking with people. She has no issue going up to people and meeting them for the first time and introducing herself. But she really she really got interested in the business and how it's run, and dug into it and became very knowledgeable about it. And so I said to her, listen, I would have no issue with you coming in here, and and so she goes out and does networking, to different events, different shows, trade events, meets other architects and people. And she enjoys it. And like I said, she loves having relationships with others. So she has that personality.
So if someone has a project that they are thinking about building a home in Pennsylvania, or what other areas do you cover?
So we've built, not just Pennsylvania, obviously, but New Jersey at the shore points, if you will, and Long Beach Island. We've built there. I've built a house in Martha's Vineyard. So we will we will go, provided it's the right project. We will travel and go to those locations to build. And a lot of times people that I built for in Pennsylvania will say, we're going to build a house down at the Jersey Shore. Would you build that house for us? Okay. Because we have that relationship established.
Mm-hmm.
So that's usually how that works is, when you get those remote location builds, they're usually people that we've already built a house for, or
What if
they know
somebody said,
somebody did.
so many people are moving to Florida, would you go down there and build a house?
It's funny that you asked that question, because that was just asked of me about a week ago of somebody that is aggressively looking for land, and asked me would I go to Florida, and I said I would. I will say this, okay. It's always easy to say to somebody, oh, absolutely, I'll be more than happy to go to Florida and build your house. But I don't do that. It's no different than what we just talked about with like new product, right? And doing the homework and wait, and instead of just jumping in and recommending something.
Yep.
So I will go to Florida. Okay. Just like I went to Long Beach Island, or I went to the Jersey Shore, and I want to get the lay of the land. Right, I want to understand, how is it done here? What are the building codes? What are the trades like here? What is the subcontractor base? What is the quality? How do they maintain schedule? And that's critical.
How would you do that? Like in like when you're going to Long Beach Island, and it really is remote, even though it's not, it's not that far, but it's far enough where it is remote.
Yeah.
And then you have a whole different set of subcontractors. You have a whole different set of regulations. You have different townships and municipalities you have to deal with. Doesn't that really make the whole process more challenging?
Well, it does. And how do you do it? Excellent question. You go to Long Beach Island. You drive around. You see houses under construction. Okay, you understand the municipality, who's head of code enforcement, what are the codes, what are the zoning codes, all of that. And you just start digging around and start talking to people. So you might see a house under construction, and listen, I have no problem pulling over and going up and introducing myself to whoever, and if there's an electrician, or talking to a project foreman or superintendent on that job, and say, hey, I'm from Philadelphia and I have a client interested in having us build a house down here. Can you give me kind of some of the ins and outs? And I've never had a negative experience with that. They've they're like, oh, that's great. And they'll give me the inside scoop. They will give me, stay away from this sub, or I highly recommend this one, and this is why. Or, they'll tell me about the code inspectors, the building inspectors. They'll tell me the lay of the land there. And, so it's not just a one trip down there, it's several, and it's several phone calls, and it's, meeting people face to face, and, getting, everything established before you say, I'm in, I'm good. I'm ready to build this thing. I'll do the job. You really have to, you got to do that homework.
So, we're running out of time. We need to wind this up. So if people have a project, or someone's watching this and say, I really want to build a luxury custom home, and Rich sounds like the kind of guy that I want to work with, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, I started my roots as a carpenter, so I'll say this: I absolutely have to spend time in my office, and we have office numbers and all that. But you want the real way to get a hold of Rich Hubbert, it would be my cell number. Okay, the 215-416-2503. That's on me 7 days a week. And I look at this business as a 7-day-a-week business, because it is. I understand that a lot of our clients, they're busy. They have schedules. They're very busy during the day. So I make myself available on the evenings and weekends to accommodate that. But, or my email, which is rhubbert@greatestates.com. That's
and
the
you
best
have
way
a
to get a
beautiful
hold of me.
website, so people can go there and take a look at your product and your projects.
Absolutely.
So Richard, thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me, Zane, and it's been a real pleasure speaking with you as well. So thank you.
Okay.